At 78, Linda Harmon had learned the art of silence. Not the peaceful kind, not the sort that came with birdsong and morning light, but the heavy kind. The kind that lingered in doorways, curled up in empty chairs and waited for her at the bottom of each cup of lukewarm tea. Her house, a neat single-story rancher with tidy hedges, and a garden she maintained with stubborn pride, held too much space for just one soul. The walls still echoed faintly with laughter that hadn't touched them in years. Once this house, or the one before it, had been loud. It had held the thump of children's feet, Andy's warm baritone, the clatter of Sunday dishes, and the layered chaos of family life. Now the only steady noise was the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the one Andy had insisted they bring when they moved, calling it the heartbeat of the house. He'd been gone 5 years now, taken not suddenly, but cruelly, one cell at a time, by pancreatic cancer. And though Linda had made peace with his death, she'd never quite learned to live in the space he left behind. She filled her calendar with watercolor classes on Thursdays and garden club meetings on Tuesdays, not out of passion, but necessity. She had always loved flowers, yes, and painting had been a surprising rediscovery in her later years. But it was the companionship that drew her back each week. The soft hum of shared stories over tea, the laughter of women who understood aching joints and empty rooms. That's where she found herself now, in community, not family. Family, after all, had grown distant, like a postcard that never arrived. Ethan, her only son, called every Sunday without fail. It was a ritual that had become predictable, almost performative. "Hey, Mum," he'd say. His voice always slightly distracted, the sound of a keyboard clicking in the background, betraying his split attention. They spoke of the weather, her latest watercolor attempts, his children's report cards, and Clara's book club drama. Pleasant enough on the surface, but always with a hollowness that echoed long after the call ended. She never asked him to visit anymore. It hurt less that way. Still, she tried to keep the threads of connection taut, never wanting to be the kind of mother who pushed too hard. She sent birthday cards with crisp bills tucked inside, congratulated her grandchildren through voicemail, and told herself that love could be quiet and still real. But doubt had begun to settle like dust on the windowsills. There was a shift, subtle at first, like the changing angle of sunlight in autumn. The calls that had once felt obligatory began to carry a new edge and interest in her affairs that went beyond casual curiosity. "Have you updated your will, Mum?" Ethan asked one afternoon, his voice a little too smooth, too prepared. "It's just good practice," he assured her. "I know a great elder law attorney. He's a friend." Linda laughed it off, calling herself experienced rather than elderly, but the question sat uneasily in her mind, echoing long after they'd hung up. Then Clara called Clara, who never called directly unless it was about gifts or holidays. "Just checking in, Mom," she said brightly. "Ethan mentioned you might not be feeling well." The concern was artificial, laced with undertones that made Linda sit straighter in her chair. "I'm perfectly fine," she replied, puzzled. She hadn't mentioned anything about her health to Ethan. Why had he said that? The questions continued, subtle but persistent. Was she taking her medications? Eating properly? Managing her finances? Clara called it just making sure. But Linda felt as if she were being audited. And then came Daniela, her eldest granddaughter, arriving on a Tuesday afternoon with a smile so wide and a hug so sweet it almost made Linda forget her unease. They had tea in the garden, just like old times, and talked about Daniela's dreams and doubts. She'd dropped out of community college, was figuring things out between jobs. "Grandma," she said hesitantly, "I hate to ask, but I'm in a bit of a tight spot financially." The amount, $5,000, made Linda pause. It wasn't insignificant, but Daniela looked so much like Ethan had at that age, with Andy's eyes and that stubborn chin. Linda wrote the check, her heart warmed by the thought of being useful, being needed. She watched from across the street 2 weeks later as Daniela, unaware of her gaze, strutted out of a boutique with shopping bags swinging from her arms and a haircut that must have cost a fortune. The warmth began to cool. Ruben came next, not asking for help directly, but pitching an investment opportunity. "It's a tech startup, Grandma," he explained confidently, showing her flashy graphs and buzzwords. $10,000 to get in at the ground floor. You could double your money in a year. She didn't understand the jargon, but Ruben had always been charming. She wrote the check. When she later asked Ethan how the business was going, his shrug told her all she needed to know. "Oh, that. It didn't work out. These things happen." The shift from love to transaction was nearly imperceptible. A little less gratitude here, a little more entitlement there. Clara began admiring her belongings during visits, running her fingers along her silver tea service and Andy's mother's pearl necklace. "This would look perfect in our dining room," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Bit by bit, Linda's home began to feel less like her sanctuary and more like a showroom. And still the checks were written. Still, the door remained open. She told herself this was what family did, they helped each other. Even as the silence returned after each visit, even as the balance in her account grew thinner and the thank you notes stopped coming, Ethan's questions about money grew more pointed. "You've got all that equity, Mum," he said over the phone one day. "You should really consider a reverse mortgage. That house is too big for you anyway." She listened, nodded, changed the subject, but inside something twisted. She remembered the days after Andy's funeral when Ethan had promised, "You won't be alone in this, Mum." He had meant it then. She believed he had. But life moved on, and she was left behind. The loneliness after Andy's death had been profound. But this new feeling was different. It was the loneliness of being surrounded by people who saw her as a resource instead of a person. Her name became synonymous with convenience, with funding, with solutions to problems that were never hers to begin with. There were moments of joy, of course. Her watercolor teacher said she had a gift for composition, and her garden bloomed with more color each spring. On warm mornings, she still danced in the living room to old records, Andy's sweater draped across the armchair. She wore his wedding ring on a chain around her neck, a quiet defiance against the passing of time. But the weight of doubt pressed on her chest more often now. Her generosity was not feeding love. It was feeding expectation. Her kindness had been twisted into currency, and somewhere along the way, the line between affection and exploitation had blurred beyond recognition. She didn't know what to do, not yet. She wasn't ready to confront them. She still hoped, perhaps foolishly, that things could change, that the next visit wouldn't end in a request, that someone would call just to hear her voice. But the cracks were deepening, and the truth, like weeds in her beloved garden, was pushing up through the soil. The family she had built, the love she had poured herself into, was shifting before her eyes. She could feel it even if she couldn't say it aloud. Not yet. Not until the day the mask slipped entirely and the truth was laid bare. Until then, she painted. She watered her roses, and she waited. Everything unraveled on a Wednesday afternoon that began like any other. The sun was soft through the curtains, and Linda sat by the bay window working on a watercolor of the roses that had just begun to bloom in her backyard. She was focused on capturing the light, the delicate curve of a petal when the phone rang. The ringtone was the one she'd assigned to Ethan classical piano, gentle, familiar. She hesitated for a moment, brush in midair. Part of her wanted to let it ring, just finish this one detail, but old habits ran deep. She set down her brush, wiped her fingers on her apron, and picked up the phone. "Hello, Ethan," she said, voice warm as ever. "Hey, Mom," he replied, his voice upbeat, almost too upbeat. "How are you feeling today?" They chatted briefly, the usual weather talk, a few updates about the kids. She asked about Ruben's job hunt, knowing full well the last she'd heard he had a new car and a startup that had apparently failed. "Actually, that's why I'm calling," Ethan continued. "We're planning a special dinner for Ruben's birthday next week. Private room at that steakhouse downtown. You'll come, right?" She smiled, touched, to be included after months of being left out. "Of course," she said, heartwarming. "What can I bring?" "Just yourself," he said quickly. "Everything's handled." "Well, actually hate to ask, but could you send $300 to Clara's account? The caterers need a deposit. Bit tight this month. Something about the request felt odd. Caterers? I thought you said it was at a steakhouse. Right, he stammered. They have a private room, but they're using a third-party caterer. Complicated stuff. She didn't press. She agreed, told him she'd transfer it right after they hung up. Thanks, Mum. You're a gem. Love you. Love you too, dear. She waited for the line to go silent, but it didn't. A rustle of voice, then another. Her heart paused. Did she fall for it? Daniela's voice. Young, confident, oblivious. Unmistakable. Came a chuckle, and then Ethan hook, line, and sinker. Linda didn't breathe. She didn't move. God, I'm so tired of these calls. Pretending to care about her dumb garden club meetings and those pathetic paintings. Keep it up, Clara said, sharp and cold. The birthday dinner will be perfect. She's been feeling left out lately. She'll bring a gift, probably cash. We can bring up the reverse mortgage again. Ruben added, always the entrepreneur. With the right pressure, she'll cave. Dad says the retirement account alone will set us all up, Clara said. Not to mention Andy's insurance money. She hasn't touched it. Should be used for family needs, Ethan muttered. Not just sitting there while she rots in that little house. Then came the final blow, his voice colder than she had ever known it. Mum's too stupid to see what's going on. Always has been. Just like Dad said, weak and easily manipulated. Her hand trembled. She hung up. Silence enveloped her like a shroud. The world once painted in warm pastels drained of all colour. She sat unmoving for a long time, the watercolour untouched, the light shifting slowly on the floorboards, as if time itself bowed in respect to her heartbreak. The betrayal wasn't just shocking, it was annihilating. Her son, her grandchildren, the people she'd lived for, sacrificed for, defended, forgiven. They didn't love her. They used her. To them, she was not a mother, not a grandmother, not a human being. She was a bank account, a resource, something to be mined until dry. She didn't cry at first. The pain sat too deep for tears. It was a silent wound, clean and precise, the kind that bleeds slowly, invisibly for days. But then came the flood. And when it did, it took everything, the illusions, the memories, the denial. She called Nellie. It was instinctual, a cry in the dark. I need you, she whispered. I need help. Nellie was there in under an hour, purse on her arm, no makeup fury in her eyes. She didn't say, I told you so. She didn't have to. She just held her sister, then sat at the kitchen table and got to work. First things first, she said, flipping open a notepad. We protect your money right now. They started with the bank accounts. Linda called the customer service line and revoked Ethan's viewing access, closed. The joint account opened a new one in her name only. She changed passwords, put PIN security questions. Are you sure, Mrs. Harmon? A teller asked gently. Yes, she said firmly. I'm sure. Credit cards were next. Ruben and Clara had been authorized users. No more. Not fraudulent, she said to the rep on the phone. Just wrong. She blocked their numbers, changed her email, wrote a list of everything they'd taken, money jewelry trust, and vowed they would get nothing more. Then she called a lawyer, not Ethan's friend, but Tina, recommended by Nellie, a no-nonsense woman with iron in her spine and compassion in her voice. Tina listened carefully, took notes, and offered a plan. We'll start with a trust, she said. We'll update your will, name a new executor, set up power of attorney and healthcare directives. You need protection. Linda nodded. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe again. She was doing something, taking her life back. Not for revenge, not to punish them, but for herself. Then came the question of the house. Sell it, Nellie said. You can't heal here. Linda hesitated, looking around at the walls. that had held decades of memories. Andy's armchair, the dining table where Ethan had learned to tie his shoes, but it was tainted now, all of it. She called a realtor the next day. It sold within a week, well above asking. She packed only what she loved, her art supplies, a few favourite books, Andy's wedding ring, the clock. The rest could go. They found a retirement community not far from Nellie, Oakwood Village. Linda had balked at first. Retirement homes had always sounded like endings. But Oakwood was different. It had art classes, a garden, music nights, and rooms filled with light. This one has a studio, the guide said, gesturing to a small sunroom with easels and brushes. We even host local exhibits. Linda stepped into the room and felt something stir, something long buried. Joy. She moved in 2 weeks later. No announcement, no forwarding address. The movers were supervised by a security team just in case. Ethan's car passed Nellie's house twice during the move, slow and quiet, like a predator watching from the grass. But he didn't stop. He didn't confront. Cowardice masquerading as distance. She left behind no trail, no way for them to reach her unless she allowed it. She was free. The apartment was small but perfect. A bay window for morning light. A kitchenette with space enough for tea and toast. A den that she immediately transformed into a studio. She unpacked her brushes, her paint, set up her easel. For the first time in years, she painted without pressure. Not to fill time or ease loneliness, but to express, to heal. She painted the garden outside her window, the sun rising over rooftops. Her old house faded like memory. Each stroke was a reclamation, each canvas a quiet victory. Weeks passed, then a month, then 2. She received voicemails pleading, panicked. "Where are you, Mum? Please call. We're worried." She deleted them. Clara sent an email full of syrup and faux concern. Ruben posted vague messages on social media about family betrayal. Daniela texted, "I miss you. Please, can we talk?" Linda stayed silent. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't cutting them off. She was drawing boundaries. If they wanted access to her life, it would have to be on new terms. She found herself again in those months. She joined a poetry group, taught a painting class to residents. She began volunteering at the local elementary school, helping 3rd graders explore watercolors. They didn't care about her past, her money, her age. They loved her for her warmth, her stories, her gentle encouragement. And Jude, sweet, bumbling, stubborn Jude, walked back into her life. He was attending dance classes at the community center. Their reunion was tentative at first, but the spark returned. He brought her homemade pastries, played classical music in his apartment, and told her she looked radiant in the morning sun. "You're painting again," he said one evening, studying her latest landscape. "You've come alive." She had. The betrayal hadn't vanished. The pain still echoed on lonely nights, but she was no longer defined by it. It was part of her story, not the whole of it. And with every brushstroke, every step through the garden, every cup of tea shared with someone who didn't want anything from her, she healed. Slowly, surely, defiantly. She had thought her life was winding down, that the best parts had already been lived and buried with Andy. But now she saw the truth. There was still colour on her palette, still light in her days, still room for laughter and growth and even love. Not the love she once knew, love bound by blood, stained by expectation, but the love she was choosing for herself. At 78, Linda wasn't just surviving. She was blooming, quietly, beautifully, on her own terms. 6 months into her new life, Linda no longer felt like she was surviving. She was living, truly, freely, richly. There was a calmness now that blanketed her days, the kind that came not from the absence of hardship, but from the hard-won peace that follows when you stop asking others for permission to exist. She'd spent most of her life being someone's something. Andy's wife, Ethan's mother, the dependable grandmother, the polite neighbour. But here, in this sun-drenched retirement village with its gentle rhythms and quiet respect, she had become someone new. She had become Linda the artist, the neighbour with the cobalt blue shawl who painted at sunrise, the woman who taught art to schoolchildren and danced again with a man who made her laugh. The apartment itself had become a sanctuary. Every inch of it bore her fingerprint. The windowsills held little glass jars of fresh-cut herbs and daisies. Her easel, permanently stationed in the east-facing corner of the living room, was surrounded by open sketchbooks, tubes of paint and coffee mugs she never quite remembered to wash. The walls were lined with her landscapes, oceans, hills, gardens bursting with colour. A few canvases were blank, waiting, always waiting, because she'd learned now that as long as you have a blank canvas, you have possibility. And Jude, dear, patient, slightly forgetful Jude, had become a comforting presence. They weren't young lovers tangled in the drama of new romance, but rather two seasoned souls who had both been bruised by life and still chose joy. Their evenings were slow and warm. They'd cook simple meals together, listen to Sinatra records, debate historical documentaries, and sometimes dance in the kitchen, laughing when they stepped on each other's toes. He never asked her for anything but her time. He admired her paintings with genuine awe, once telling her she painted like someone who'd survived a storm but remembered the colour of the sky before it hit. She'd laughed, then cried later in bed because he had seen something in her that no one else had bothered to look for. Her circle had grown in unexpected ways. There was Thelma, the retired professor who ran the book club and never showed up without a critique and a pie. Sophia, with her grass F but PE. It was a Tuesday when he came. She was in the community centre, setting up the art space for an afternoon class with the elementary school kids, when she heard his voice behind her. Mum. Her heart stopped. Slowly she turned around. Ethan stood in the doorway holding a bouquet of lilies, her favourite, and wearing the familiar, carefully practiced smile that used to fool her. He looked thinner, more tired than she remembered, as if guilt and frustration had gnawed at him in her absence. "We've been worried," he said quickly, stepping forward. "Clara's beside herself. The kids, they miss you. Why did you disappear like that?" She didn't answer immediately. She wanted to study his face, wanted to see if any of the old Ethan remained. The boy who used to wake her on Christmas morning with sticky kisses, who had once cried when she scraped her knee. But all she saw now was the man she'd overheard that afternoon, the voice that had laughed at her, stripped her dignity without remorse. "I think you know why," she said softly. "No, I don't," he said, the smile faltering. "You forgot to hang up the phone," she replied. And just like that, the mask dropped. His eyes darted away, his fingers tensed around the bouquet's stems. "Mum," he began, "we were just joking. Don't." She interrupted, her voice calm, cool, deadly steady. "Don't insult my intelligence by pretending it was anything but deliberate. I heard every word, the plans, the laughter, the contempt." He opened his mouth, closed it, and tried a different tack. "We're family, Mum. Families fight. Families go through rough patches." "Yes," she agreed, "but families don't scheme to take each other's homes. Families don't reduce their mothers to bank accounts. Families don't call their own flesh and blood stupid when they think she can't hear." He lowered his eyes, the lilies now drooping between them. "What do you want from me?" he asked finally, his voice tinged with weariness and something else, maybe regret, maybe just frustration. "An apology." "No," she said. "I don't want anything from you. That's the point. I'm not here to be needed. I'm not a well for you to draw from. If you want a relationship with me, it will be built on respect, honesty, and mutual care. No more guilt, no more manipulation, no more money talk. And if that's not acceptable, then we don't have a relationship at all." The silence that followed was suffocating. Ethan looked stunned, as if the idea of his mother not needing him, not waiting for him, not yearning for his approval was inconceivable. "You're really going to cut us off?" he said, a defensive edge creeping into his tone. Your own family. I'm not cutting you off, she replied. I'm setting boundaries. Whether you choose to accept them or walk away is up to you. He didn't respond. He set the lilies down on the table between them. Then, without another word, he left. She stood still for a long time after he was gone, looking at the flowers that had once brought her so much joy and now sat like a half-hearted bribe wilting in the sun. She didn't cry. She didn't feel vindicated. She felt tired, but also light, like she had finally put down a burden she didn't know she'd been carrying her whole life. The calls came in waves after that. Clara's voice syrupy and fake, asking if Linda was getting the help she needs. Ruben's text suggesting they have a chat and clear up the misunderstanding. Daniela's voicemail, weepy and accusatory, claiming Linda had abandoned the family. She didn't answer any of them. She owed no explanations. The ball was in their court now. If they truly wanted to rebuild a relationship, they would come with humility, not entitlement. Instead, Linda turned back to her life. She had a community art show to prepare for, and a group of eager third graders waiting to learn about color blending. She had tomatoes ripening in her kitchen, and a dinner reservation with Jude at the Serbian bistro downtown. She had her yoga class, her book club, and her morning painting sessions under that east-facing light that made everything look golden and possible. Her days filled slowly, steadily with purpose. She sold a painting at the art fair, one of her landscapes with a solitary tree and a riot of wildflowers. The buyer said it made her feel both happy and brave, and Linda smiled because that was exactly how she had felt while painting it. One Saturday evening, as she and Jude sipped wine on her small balcony, she turned to him and said, I don't know how I let it get that far. I don't know why I didn't see it sooner. You saw, he said gently. You just didn't want to believe. Because love makes us hopeful, and hope makes us blind sometimes. She nodded, resting her hand over his. It won't happen again. I know, he said, because now you're awake, and you're stronger than you think. In time, the sharpness of the betrayal dulled. She didn't forget, but she forgave not for their sake, but for hers. She needed to. Otherwise, the bitterness would grow roots, and she'd already spent too many years nurturing everyone else's gardens but her own. Each morning, she stood at her easel brush in hand, sun warming her cheek, and each morning, she painted something that made her feel alive. A new flower, a memory transformed a dream not yet lived. She had stopped painting to distract herself from pain. Now she painted to celebrate survival. At 78, Linda was finally free. Not because life had spared her heartbreak, but because she had learned to walk through it and out the other side. She was living, not for obligation, not for legacy, not for approval, but for herself. Every brushstroke was a declaration, every canvas a reclamation. Her life was no longer a backdrop for someone else's story. It was her own masterpiece, and the best parts were still being painted. Thank you so much for staying with us through Linda's powerful and emotional journey. Her story is a reminder that it's never too late to reclaim your life, set boundaries, and choose your own happiness. If this story touched your heart or made you reflect on your own experiences, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support means everything to us, and we can't wait to share more with you.